If you're anything like me, you might feel like you're literally drowning in these things. Because you got one of these, and they got one of these. Let me tell you, it gets expensive. You know those bills we were talking about? Come here, let me show you some.
That's as good as money, sir. Those are IOUs.
He's not wrong.
Today, we're going to break down that little-known method of paying or performing on bills that you might not have heard of. Many have been shouting from the rooftops for a while that these babies are just as good as cash. What are they even talking about? How did we get here? What does it all mean? So glad you asked. Now, to keep this social life destroying material to an absolute simplified minimum, I think it's fair to start with a little history lesson. What we're talking about today is all made possible by the following. The first one, HJR 192. That's the granddaddy. The main one, the banking restructure that took place around 1933, basically when the government decided to confiscate all the gold and move us into a world of negotiable instruments. What does that mean?
And I hereby decree the Scarecrow, by virtue of his highly superior brains, shall rule in my stead, assisted by the Tin Man, by virtue of his magnificent heart, and the Lion, by virtue of his courage. Obey them as you would me.
It was more or less a bankruptcy restructuring, and the birth certificates of all the people may or may not have been used as direct collateral relevant to that. This is also about the time the public was introduced to income tax and Federal Reserve notes, both initially optional for usage. But what was it really? To those in the know, it was really just a clever way to steal the people's labor energy by making everyone work 8 hours a day perpetually to earn Federal Reserve notes to pay off their bills.
That just sounds like slavery with extra steps.
Whoa. Exactly. So what do we do about a situation like this?
Just play the game backwards, bro, like Parsifal, often depicted as a naive, innocent knight who undergoes spiritual transformation while on his quest to find the Holy Grail.
Thank you for that. Roll the tape. Ready Player One.
Go back! 10 seconds!
Why can't we go backwards for once? Backwards, really fast.
You figured something out. Parsifal, tell me.
So if paying bills was a game, what would it look like to play the game backwards? Well, it starts with a lot of reading and a lot of redefining the words that we think we know. And then it has to do with learning and using the particulars of the mail system that most of us are unfamiliar with. Please, investigate for yourself everything that I'm showing you here today if any of this is unfamiliar. So we've got these core concepts that when you peel back, really establish the fundamentals that we can use to our advantage. 18 USC 8, obligations of the U.S. government. This is the one everybody refers to. All bills, notes, drafts, bills of exchange, orders to pay, promises to pay. It's all covered. It's all an obligation of the U.S. government. And that is proven by 31 USC 1501, documentary evidence required for those government obligations. Some of you have seen how I reference that in the free templates on the website. Now, USC Title 31, Money and Finance, makes us all bankers. We're all the officers that is referred to in 18 USC 8 obligations. UCC Section 3, 104, Negotiable Instruments defined. UCC Section 3, 204, Endorsement. What is an endorsement? That's where it's defined. UCC Section 3, 401 and 402, what is a signature? Black's Law Dictionary, payment equals performance. That's a big one. That blew my mind. But when they say that we need to pay a bill, what they're really saying is that we need to perform on that bill. Payment equals performance. The knowledge of that can be used to our advantage. Bills of Exchange Act, that's the other one. UK and Britain law is really the source framework for everything that comes to the USA. So it's definitely still relevant in this discussion. So what do we do when we get a scary bill in the mail? First thing to consider is what kind of bill is it? Now, depending on the bill, the debt, the time frame, there are some considerations and method variations to think about that might determine which path you take. You can take multiple paths, but which path you take first is often the one everyone gets stuck on. So, low effort remedy, often one step to discharge, usually comes with something like an outstanding IRS debt, tax debt, or a third-party collection. These two things are extremely easy to perform on and send back where they came from, often never to be heard from again. So what does performance look like? When they say we need to pay, i.e. perform, what is to perform? Well, you can perform with a stamp. Something like this. It says accepted, payable to bearer, without recourse, and the agent always signs for the principal. You can obtain this stamp on the website. If you don't have the stamp, you can just use a red pen. The stamp helps when you want to do a lot of these, and it helps maintain your compliance with UCC with regard to signing on behalf of the principal as an agent. So we sign accepted, payable to bearer. You can also do payable to the order of, and then whoever the creditor is, payable to the order of U.S. Treasury, payable to the order of bearer, payable to the order of, fill it in later. But what the stamp says, that's the most universal, keeps the negotiability of the instrument in place, is accepted, payable to the order of bearer or payable to bearer without recourse by agent signing for the principal. Here, I've done that on a tax debt. You can do this on the front or the back, doesn't matter. And then if you'd like to add a postage stamp and then sign through it, this makes you the postmaster of this piece of mail, this instrument, and it elevates the authority of the instrument to both federal and international level protection. Money and mail are both protected. You can use this same principle to apply substance on literally any debt that comes to the mailbox, comes into your temple. Commerce comes into your temple, they just sent you cash. This is the equivalent of cash. And by turning it into substance with the signature and with that endorsement, using the stamp, you're giving your target the equivalent of cash. The difference is whether they're willing to take that and accept it and go away. Just a matter of you giving it a shot to see what happens. In the first two examples, IRS debts and collections, the organization receiving your instrument is the most willing to participate, the most willing to acknowledge and apply your performance. The next two, credit cards and auto loans, and then court judgments, these in particular require the administrative process. What is administrative process? Got to talk about that chain, dog. It's just chain of custody for your documents. It requires a level of seriousness to the communication exchange that happens so that you're prepared to go to court if you need to. And in many cases, you will need to. How we use this information to our advantage here is the knowledge of an instrument is an instrument. It doesn't matter whether it's a Federal Reserve note or the instrument they provided, which you've applied your substance to with your endorsement. All per UCC, per Bill of Exchange Act, compliant with 18 USC 8, UCC tender of payment. To the amount of the payment, there is discharge. If they refuse it, there is discharge. If they don't honor it, there is discharge. How we're using this to our advantage is the knowledge of them being in the corruption so long that they'll happily refuse it and become non-compliant with UCC and contract law. That's where we get them. So the concept is simple. With a credit card and auto loan, you tender a payment. You use administrative process to tender the payment. They refuse to accept it. You call them out on breach of contract. So you can open up a dispute over the phone. Sometimes that will often get your payment acknowledged after you make the dispute. Sometimes they continue to play dumb. You enforce legal action, you sue them for very simple breach of contract, and then you win in arbitration and you come to some sort of settlement, which you may not be able to talk about because they'll make you sign an NDA. And this is typically what happens, but it requires an additional level, let's say level 2 difficulty and fear factor with regard to credit cards, auto loans, and court judgments. Court judgments, the administrative process remains, but it might be a little bit easier to prove that you tendered a payment back to the person that's entitled to enforce the instrument, which is the judge. It's a lot easier to hold the judge accountable because you have direct access to the individual that wrote the order, wrote the judgment.
I'm the only one that knows how to use them. They're no use to you. Give them back to me. Give them back.
Keep tight inside of them. Their magic must be very powerful, or she wouldn't want them so badly.
right? With a credit card company, there's an abstraction there that it's hard to hold them accountable because of the layers of difficulty to get to the individuals who know how to actually enforce the instrument. The judge will know how to enforce the instrument. It's just a matter of using the administrative process appropriately and completely and putting them on the hook. Your mileage may vary depending on the corruption levels of your court system in your area. So auto loans, pretty much the same thing. They're going to refuse your coupon. They're going to call you crazy. They'll call you a sovereign citizen. They'll tell you not to do it again. But the reality is, using UCC law, using contract law, you can properly tender a payment using the administrative process. You can prove that they breached the contract, and you can move into arbitration or write up a cause of action with the help of ChatGPT and sue your auto finance company for the failure to perform on your instrument. I'm actually in the process of this right now with my auto finance company, and I look forward to bringing you guys along in the experience and sharing the victory when we win. Just to recap, with the judge, with your judgment, you'll tender your instrument back to the court, back to either the clerk of court or to the judge. Maybe start with the clerk first, and if the clerk rejects you for some reason, you can just send it registered mail right to the judge. Gives the judge a little bit more flexibility, what they'll put on the record, how they want to apply the record into the books. So I've heard. But you may need to compel the court to action. They may not do anything. They'll put your bond or put your instrument on the record, and then nothing happens. You need to likely motion the court because you've technically ended the equity dispute. So it's just a matter of motioning the court to prove to the court that you have indeed ended the equity dispute by applying substance directly into the record.
You cursed brat! Look what you've done! I'm melting! Melting! Oh, what a world! What a world! Who thought a good little girl like you could destroy my beautiful wickedness?
So that's the general idea there. So let's recap what we learned. If you got one of those scary IRS debts or a collection of any kind from a third party, those are the easiest to discharge. Those two things. You can send them back where they came from, registered or certified mail. Either one usually works because both are willing to accept and acknowledge, usually, the things that you're sending. Now, if it's an IRS bill, you'll use a cover letter similar to the one that I'm holding up right here on the screen right now, and you'll apply the performance on it just like in the example here. Same thing with your collections. Perform on it, give them a simple cover letter, clarify that you're tendering a payment per your state equivalent of UCC, tender of payment, and you'll likely never hear from either of those again. Templates for all of this stuff is on the website, decryptedmatrix.com/freedom. Now, the last and perhaps scariest for many is dealing with the IRS and attempting to claim these debts through their 1040 tax return. We're understanding now that these instruments, once you've applied your substance, they are valuable. Anything valuable needs to be claimed properly as income if you want the IRS and the Treasury to acknowledge those instruments as an incoming payment that you've made to them. That's generally the concept with our last method here with getting remedy, is to endorse your instruments, send them as a deposit package, in essence, to the Treasury, and then get the Treasury to acknowledge those deposits by claiming them formally on a 1040 tax return. So in the next video, what are the steps to getting a claim through? Line items, which deductions, how does all that work? We'll peel that back and explore that together on the next video, claiming your debts with the IRS and the Treasury. But for today, these instruments have value. When you're getting bills in the mail, don't be sad because they're sending you the equivalent of cash. Till next time.